Hi, this is A New Nigeria with Wale Oluwade. This is your current affairs program where we critically examine the strategic issues bedeviling Nigeria's developmental aspirations and boldly offer practical suggestions on building the Nigeria of our collective desires. Today's episode promises to be engaging and exciting. My guest is already here to assist me in doing justice and also give depth and clarity to the topic of our discourse. As always, it's going to be evidence-driven, honest, bold, and a no-holds-barred conversation. So get ready as we begin in earnest. And now, let's get on with it. Today, we're looking at the state of the nation and the 2023 general elections. In addition to the several deplorable social crises confronting Nigeria, there seems to be no imminent end to the 6-month-long strike action by Academic Staff Union of Nigerian universities. This is coming on the heels of the recent comments by the Minister of State for Labour, Barrister Festus Kenyamo, SAN, where he implored Nigerian parents to appeal to the striking lecturers to call off their months-long action. Yet, Nigerians are wondering and asking, how is it that a government which indeed paid 1.53 trillion for 2021 and is paying currently, as I speak, 4 trillion for 2022 and has budgeted 6.7 trillion for 2023 fuel subsidy yearly appropriations cannot find the funds to meet ASUU's demand so our children can resume their studies? Also, and even more curious, how is it that the federal government seem not to appreciate the dangerous nexus between the high incidence of crimes, social vices, and youth hopelessness, despair, and unemployment, which is exacerbated by the university strike? So, what is the role of critical Nigerian stakeholders in resolving this disgraceful and embarrassing impasse? What impact, if any, does this have on next year's general elections? Indeed, what is the way forward? These are some of the issues we're examining today. We'll take this short break, and when we return, we'll get right into the conversation. Stay with us. Welcome back. My guest is already here. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is the Professor of Mass Communication at Bayes University, Abuja, and also a public affairs analyst. Prof, good afternoon.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again.
Me. It's a pleasure.
Now, let's get right into the conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
When you had, or rather, when you saw Barrister Festus Kenyamo, Minister for State for Labour, recently on television, where he stated that federal government does not have money to pay ASUU, and rather the decision is to implore parents. What came through your mind?
I thought it said a couple of other things, so many things really, but maybe we should just pick the ones that are relevant to us, one of which you've already highlighted, you know. And the second was that he said the dispute is not between his ministry and ASUU, but it's between the Federal Ministry of Education and ASUU. And their own responsibility, their own intervention is coming because they're just mediators, so to say. He made that point. Then the second point again that I think I can come out with was that the crisis has been intractable. So it has come to a stage where, if it is possible, moral suasion should now come in through appeals, you know. That if it was possible, he too could even go on his knees, pleading with ASUU. And of course, there was an extension that even parents could as well intervene. And I think ASUU has responded somewhat by saying that it's not about pleading with them, you know, it's not a question of moral blackmail, but a question of government, you know, coming into the situation, being much more realistic and going as far as possible to meet their demands. And what is their demand? It's a long-standing one coming from the 2009 agreement, memorandum of understanding. And from then on, you know, it has been implemented only in the breach, whereby only 200 billion has been released to them in the period of Jonathan. And because of the non-release of these monies that was supposed to be 200 billion every year, the public universities have been suffering. There's a dearth of infrastructure, there's a dearth of utilities, you know, there are so many unpaid allowances, professors, lecturers, you know, are not getting, of course, living wages, they're just barely existing. So to show up their circumstances, improve environment, improve conditions of service, which is something that is actually good for the onerous task of intellection, disseminating knowledge, and research, really, growing the next generation of manpower into the nation's economy. You need some minimum requirements, some minimum conditions, and those are the conditions that ASUU is talking about. And that's where we are, really. The fact that we haven't had enough response from government in terms of, the provision of funds that will help these public universities to thrive.
Thank you for that opening remarks.
Yeah.
I like what you said about, trying to give a brief expose on the current state of our, but I'm not sure we can do that in 30 minutes or 1 hour.
Yeah.
The rot, a description of the rot or the current deplorable condition of a public tertiary institution. Is it in terms of infrastructure? Is it in terms of the dearth of competent faculty? Is it in terms of ability to attract foreign students? You and I were a product of public education.
Sure.
From primary to university. Whatever we did outside of this country was built on the foundation, solid foundation that was laid here. Let me ask you again, Prof, and I would appeal that you do this short, maybe 30 seconds, because I have a number. I want us to cover as many questions as possible. Can you narrow down specifically what exactly is the basis of the federal government's intransigence in meeting ASUU? Let me provide you a rider. You see, Barrister Kenyamo tried to gaslight Nigerians, not just ASUU. And when I say gaslight, I'm sure you know that's just a euphemism for lying. And trying to blackmail the professors by saying they were asking for 1.2 trillion. The entire deal with President Jonathan 2000 was 1.2 trillion. What ASUU, like you rightly said, every year you also give them 200 billion.
Yes.
So the ASUU is not asking for the entire 1.2 trillion to be paid. No. So in my intro, I said this government 2021 gave 1.537 trillion budgeted for
subsidy.
Subsidy, and they paid. This year is 4 trillion and they are paying. Next year the budget is 6 trillion and they are going to pay. But it seems to the federal government that subsidy is more important than education. So I'm asking you in 20 or 30 seconds, Prof, what exactly do you think is in the mind of the federal government to have treated ASUU and our future, the youths that we call the future? Why are they treating them this way?
Well, I think it's all a matter of understanding and priority, which can be very, very subjective, but again, the way to get around it is to continue with very strong agitation that is not necessarily destructive. Government often have their own priorities, and the arguments they have made is that severally is that there are so many sectors that are in need of funds. And of course, we're in a period where there's scarcity of resources. And if there's scarcity of resources, ASUU alone cannot be asking for the much they are asking, at the expense of power sector, at the expense of health, at the expense of all other sectors. But that does not mean that government is correct, They are not correct because ASUU has provided a window that if you cannot provide everything at once, why don't you do 200 billion every year? And of course, there's also another very strong argument. In the period of COVID, there were so many ways government intervened, spending trillions of naira, for some social programs, for some humanitarian programs as well. Government intervened. They raised the money. So if government can raise the money, to deal with those circumstances, then why not ASUU, which is a very critical sector. But let's not forget that it's also about programs, about priorities, then about the vision of the government and the leaders in power. But how do we tweak that vision to suit the educational sector now? That is a challenge that we'll probably need to deal with.
Brilliant, Prof. I don't think it's a brainer to actually remind the federal government and the officials of the federal government that the education sector in Nigeria being the way it is, so education currently takes a whole lot of foreign exchange out of Nigerian system, because now we're grappling with a weak currency.
About 150 billion naira is said to be spent on foreign education.
It's way more than that. We're talking of 1 billion, 1.5 billion US dollars.
That's right.
1.5 billion US dollars. In today's,
just conservative
in today's figures, yes. that's almost, I mean, $1 billion is almost 700 billion naira. Yeah. So if you are saying 1.5, that's almost 1 something trillion.
Yeah, that's right.
Naira.
In dollars.
In
I said minimum of 150 billion naira.
And
estimated,
the twin is the health sector that's almost $2.5 billion annually. But let's focus, since we're talking about ASUU now. So if we're losing this humongous sum of money every year, I mean, there's a live scenario playing out. Our students, do you know how many Nigerians were brought back from Ukraine because of the war? Why would Nigerian students go to Ukraine for studies? So that brings me back to the issue. Prof, our elites and politicians, I love what you said about the vision of the people, but can any government campaign for elections and education will not be a priority? And that's what I'm asking again. The elites because don't forget, Prof, it's not as if the elites of Nigeria, you see the pictures every time now. I talked about it here on other programs. You see pictures of Nigerian elites. Their kids are graduating from overseas. So I'm asking you, Prof, again, in very 1 minute, if you can. Why are our elites and government officials treating education this way? Do they understand or appreciate the nexus between education and the current crime situation, the social crisis we're facing? Do they understand?
Well,
in your own opinion?
I wish I'm one of them to be able to explain properly.
You are, aren't you?
I'm outside, I'm in the academia. But the much I can say is that education may not necessarily be taken in isolation. And I'm saying it advisedly because if you look at other sectors, they are also suffering. And they are suffering not because we cannot really deal with them, but because of the reluctance, of the poor zeal of leaders in the present and in the past, to prioritize public interest above private interest. And that's why you are seeing what you are seeing now, with a situation where their own words have been largely been educated abroad, which is indirectly impoverishing our own local institutions. And our public institutions have to be given the renewed concern because federal government in itself is registering quite a number of private institutions. At the last count, we're about 80-something. Before long now, it will be about 100. And many of them are doing exceedingly well, challenging the public institutions. So the fear now is that in the next couple of years, public universities might go the way of primary schools and secondary schools of old, public primary and secondary schools of old, that people no longer go to. People are now going to private institutions at those remedial preliminary levels. The fear is that public universities should not go that route. But what do we do? And it actually comes back to the question of leadership. Leadership will always feature, just like the tortoise will feature in every story, in every discourse around the underdevelopment or the lack of development of the Nigerian differentiated sectors. Leadership will always feature. But the center of leadership, of course, is the presidency. And that's why the next election should actually, we should actually get that one right so that we can have a new vision, a new vision, a new drive, and a proper prioritization of the things that we need to propel us to the next level or the next pedestal that we want to be in as a people.
Absolutely. Let's take this short break. Yeah. We'll take this short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with our conversation. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Prof, with the spate of killings, general insecurity pervading our nation's landscape, there are whisperings now that maybe 2023 elections may either not hold at all or maybe postponed. Do you foresee, or do you think that's like someone trying to play the devil's advocate, or maybe trying to, what's the word now? Like trying to fly a kite or something. What do you think?
No, I think the elections will hold. Okay. We have been through this part before, where when an election is imminent, people will keep expressing fear against the background of prevailing circumstances that the election will not hold. All kinds of conspiracy theories will be going on. But I think our leaders are ordinarily responsible enough to know the implication of not letting election hold. So I think they will work, they will try as much as possible to prevent a situation where, for any reason at all, elections will not hold. We're going to have elections by the grace of God. Given past experiences, from scaremongering, and even against the scaremongering, you still have election. Yes, the situation we are in now is very unfortunate. High level of insecurity, poverty, prevailing poverty in the land, scarce resources, and fear of even coming out of your house, and of course, fear of traveling, moving from one city to the other because you might be kidnapped and you don't know where you are going to be released. I mean, how are you going to release this kind of...
Prof, sorry to
so I was going to conclude by saying that, I think whatever it takes, I want to trust in our leaders that they will do it to ensure that we'll have election next year.
But if you consider, Prof, if you consider the colossal sums that the federal government has sunk into this sector, defense and security sectors, and then you see our massacre, Kuje jailbreak, Kaduna train, bombing, and then some of our competitors are still with the bandits, even after almost $1 billion in ransom has been paid. We can't trail the money, we can't arrest them and all of that. Okay, good enough. I think yesterday they just arrested some of the suspects in the whatever. And then, of course, the Buhari law school attack where brigade of guards, officers of brigade of guards were actually slain, Is it not right to entertain fears? Because this is Abuja we're talking about, the capital of the entire country. We used to think, this insecurity is in some far-flung places, but it's coming home. In fact, it's home here already. So is it too far away to entertain serious fears?
No.
Briefly, Prof.
No. It's legitimate.
The fears, are they unfounded?
No, they are not unfounded.
Exactly.
But it's also not something that we should begin to break bones over.
Okay.
Because there is no society that is absolutely crime-free. And crime is very dynamic, Things keep changing. The onus is always on crime prevention or crime-preventing agencies, to also be creative in their thinking so that they can match this dynamism as they unfold. So the task is for our own agencies and to also continue to go ahead of these criminals, as they are busy changing their tactics. And by all means, I think we have our agencies are much more organized, much more systematic, much more weaponized to be able to deal with these miscreants, masquerading as bandits, as ideologues, terrorists, etc. Only because they have ammunitions, because of the proliferation of light and small arms coming from the Sahel regions, and because of government inability to interdict them in the first instance. That's why we're having these experiences. But let's not forget there are some much more fundamental things that actually led to all this. Our population is exploding unchecked, and many years of deindustrialization, poor management of our forests, poor forests that could have been arable lands, like one of the politicians said, could have been the other kind of crude oil. These places have been abandoned over the years and the criminals are taking advantage of it. Then long years of corruption, misgovernance, neglect of the grassroots sector, the local governments that is supposed to be closest to these people. So all these things, the chicken is practically just coming home to roast.
There's some talk of impeachment of the president by the National Assembly before they proceeded on their annual break or holidays. They gave the president 6 weeks to do some things, otherwise when they return they would begin impeachment process. Is it coming too late or is it even necessary at all? What do you think?
No, I think it was good as a statement. It's a reflection of the mood of the nation.
Exactly.
It's a reflection of the mood of the nation. Mr. President, you'll probably be doing some things, but we're not feeling it because we're becoming insecure, even in Abuja. So if you cannot do it well, please, this is what you should do. We're going to take you out. So at some level, it's looking more like a statement, and a statement, and of course, to some extent, it probably will have gingered the president, to get down to work. If at all it was, he was relaxing before. But of course, we know technically, practically, it's practically impossible. It might be largely impossible for them to pull it through because there are so many complications. And do not forget that our system, our institutions are still too weak to withstand the shock of a presidential impeachment.
Exactly.
It's not a governorship impeachment, but a presidential. At this time, it's still too weak. But even there, even before you get there, there will be some truncation along the line.
In any case, the period envisaged or provided for in the constitution is about 6 months. Now, if you take 6 months between now and election and all of that, Okay, let's round up, Prof, on this note. These elections next year, I think both of us agree that they're going to be very, very critical for the future of Nigeria. You know, a lot is riding on these forthcoming elections. Right. In your own opinion, if you can, in 1 minute, they've already said, you know, if you can in 1 minute, Prof, what are the 3 key issues you want to hear the main candidates? What are the 3 key issues, you know, media people should take them to task on these issues? 3.
1, insecurity. Okay. Has to be dealt with. 2, you know, corruption, the crisis of corruption. You know, is the big elephant in the room. It is continuing, and the next government should just come and continue with patronage and compensation, papering the corruption on crack. You know, the fight against corruption should be real. And 4th, power. Third, power. You know, the institutions. You know, utilities and infrastructure. You know, should have to be focused on. Power is very important. Education is also critical. What about health? You know, many of these sectors, you know, need attention, and we have neglected them in so many ways in the past because of our preference. You know, for foreign options. No nation grows like this. You know, we can bring ourselves to a level. Look, I was privileged to listen to the EFCC chairman this afternoon, and I heard what he said. He said the money that is voted for capital projects in this country, if it is genuinely used, properly used, not frittered away in corruption, we will not be where we are. And that's why when they see things like this, they become saddened and they are determined to continue the fight against corruption.
Couldn't agree more, Prof. Thank you so much, Prof.
My pleasure. Thanks for
having me. Time flies, but that's it for today. Thanks for having you, Prof. And I'll see you next time.
No problem.
That's the end of the interview segment. We'll take this short break, and when we return, I'll give my closing statements. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Nigerians haven't actually realized that they, the people, are the employers of elected public officials without our votes, either as delegates at party primaries, where the candidates emerged, or at the general elections, where the winner of elections are decided. The people, you and I, are the employers. The president, governors, federal and state legislators, all without exception, work for us. They got to office by our votes and retain same at our pleasure. Therefore, how is it that the employer begins to genuflect before his employees? Imagine a scenario where an employer of labor will watch as his or her employee appropriates all the resources of the business for the employee's personal consumption, while the employer does nothing until such a business goes bankrupt. That's exactly what has happened in the last 23 years. Elected and appointed government officials have criminally appropriated the resources of the people for their personal use, and we, the owners, stand idly by, grumbling and murmuring at best, or even worse, applauding them because they threw some miserable crumbs at us. The only reason, for instance, why Nigerian public university students will be sitting idle for going to 6 months now, and elected government officials seem totally unbothered, is because there is no fear of any consequence whatsoever. This cannot be democracy. I make bold to state there is no democracy in the world where this kind of unaccountable and utterly irresponsible brand of democracy is practiced. And this has got to stop. I offer the following recommendations going forward. Number 1, we need to activate democratic safeguards. Democracy doesn't always guarantee that the electorate will make the best choices. When this happens, however, the system likewise provides safeguards which ensures the error can be corrected. Impeachment or recall of a non-performing executive or legislator is one such potent mechanism. These strategic tools are not mere constitutional democratic artifacts or decorative works to be admired but not used. If this democracy must deliver for the majority of Nigerians, we must use this more frequently. Elected officials who know they could easily be removed from office for non-performance will be more inclined to deliver on their mandates. Secondly, we need to reactivate active pressure groups. There was a time in the history of this country when pressure groups such as the Nigerian Labour Congress, NUPENG, NANS, ASUU, etc., were key forces driving positive change by holding governments and its agencies accountable. But sadly, this was during the era of military dictatorships. Once the military retreated to their barracks, these critical pressure groups and social watchdogs went to sleep. Indeed, in some cases, they became, as it were, accomplices to the corruption and misrule perpetrated by the politicians and elites, and so have contributed immensely to the decay in the general society. Let me be honest, without a vibrant and genuinely patriotic pressure groups, this democracy will not survive much longer. Finally, the role of the media. To my fellow colleagues and friends in the fourth estate of the realm, the media establishment, when we interact with some of these public officials, can we please stop the sickening praise singing, cheerleading, and fawning sycophancy among some of us? Our job involves to be dispassionate and objective in their criticisms. This further includes holding their feet to the fire on their campaign promises and manifestos. It also includes calling them out when they fall short of expectations and holding them accountable when they transgress the laws or the oaths of their offices. I do realize that some of us have seriously compromised, ourselves, and so lack the independence to put these guys on their toes. But the rest of us cannot be such, or posterity will not be kind to us. Now, remember, change requires action, and positive change requires positive action. I believe in a new Nigeria, and it is possible. And those are my closing thoughts. Now, that's the program for today. Remember to follow me on my different social media handles. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can watch this particular video at your convenience. Drop your comments also. I'd love to hear from you. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.